Hi, I'm Laura McCracken. I'm here in Berlin at the Merchant Payment Ecosystems in the beautiful Marlene Dietrich Bar. And I'm here to lead the myth-busting session that we have here. And I'm lucky to be accompanied by Mr. Kilian Thalhammer, who is the Global Head of Merchant Solutions at Deutsche Bank. So he's going to help me bust some myth.
Let's do that. Great to be
Wonderful.
here. Thanks for the invitation, and let's tackle the first myth.
Thank you. So you just finished a nice session, an opening session with Mr. Birch. How did that session feel? About what was it about?
Yeah, it was an unusual opening of such a conference, because normally it starts with keynotes and things like that, and we kicked it off with a more cozy but also open panel. It was not so controversial, but we discussed and we touched a lot of different topics. We discussed about the role of the technology in the payment space. We discussed about will card payments disappear, or did we saw already the peak or not? We discussed a little bit about the role of the wallets and what consumers and merchants want. So quite broad. I think a quite good entry point for the more deep dive sessions later on.
Yeah. And what was your key learning? If anything?
The overall key learning was there was not so much disagreement on the panel. We are maybe not so controversial. Maybe it was also part of because we are the number one in that panel. But there was a lot of agreement. There were not, and number one and number two, everybody is really valuing the merchants. So we realized on the panel that without the merchant and without the consumers, we can do a lot of payment nerd talks within the industry, but at the end, without these parts of the ecosystem, nothing will work. And so that means the focus of the merchant is sometimes disappearing, and we need to bring that back and see that as our number one goal.
So lots of collaboration in this
Lots
industry.
of collaboration and
in the ecosystem, which is why we're here.
Like the name.
Very good, very good. Okay, so I have a list of 10 myths that the members of this conference have come up with, and I'm gonna give you number 7.
I'm happy only to solve one, and
I'm just gonna give you one per person. I'm gonna give you number 7. So your myth that you're gonna help me figure out today: open banking will never be adopted by merchants. What say you, Kilian?
It's a quite straightforward statement in that context, but I don't see that it will never, because number one, merchants are already using it, and there are certain use cases where open banking totally makes sense for the merchants. It's still, the adoption phase will always be longer than expected. We should have in mind that it took us 20 years until contactless payment was normal. Now we have 80% of all card transactions are contactless, or even 90. So that means the first transaction was 20 years ago. So I think the same will happen on open banking. And on top, that open banking is not a really hard definition. What is open banking right now, and what is the open banking payment method behind that? Are we talking about the PSD2 driven open banking? Are we talking about request to pay driven by EBA clearing? Are we talking about the new European payment initiatives, which has also open banking aspects in it? So it's not so tangible. But given that fact, that this is a broad topic, I would not agree on that topic that merchants will never adopt on that.
So your answer, if it's true or false or complicated, you're going to say it's false.
It's definitely false.
Definitely false.
That's definitely false. But we will talk about the topics for the next years, and it will not happen overnight.
Now let me ask you this. I mean, when we talk about open banking, I feel like Europe has been kind of doing open banking for a while before the UK, because UK talks about it a lot. It's a big thing in the UK right now.
Yeah.
But it's almost like Germany, with Sofort and other methods. You kind of have been doing bank to account transfers.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons is that technology-wise, and that sometimes did not fit to the perception that the overall regions have when it comes to technologies. Europe was a little bit farther down the road than UK and the US.
Further ahead.
Ahead, not
ahead.
down the road. Ahead. Ahead than the
Take
US.
credit where your credit is due.
That is the same thing when it comes to open banking. So that means, I think one reason for that is maybe, so continental Europe was never so card heavy than the other ones. So that means there was more space and more room for that. We had more regulation. So regulation forced us to open up our systems and building up APIs and things like that. So that was part of the reasons. And now UK and US are adopting. So we are now, as Deutsche Bank, educating our people on the ground in the US about what is these PSD2 about. Is there an equivalent also in the US? What is the added value? What is the role of banks in that play? And that's an interesting discussion.
Well, the US is always behind.
Yeah. Not always, but in the
Yeah.
payments, we still have some paper-based stuff there, and I still need to sign some payments, which sounds weird. No?
Yeah, it just shows you how, when you have a big infrastructure, a mature infrastructure, sometimes it's hard to move with the new technology, right?
It is. We have an infrastructure. There's a lot of investments into this infrastructure, and it's a good infrastructure, but it's not easy to move. So it's not easy to move. It's not easy to change. So, and changing such a complex international thing is always part of big investments, and will be then at the end paid by the banks. The banks are more or less forced to invest into that infrastructure. By the regulator and sometimes also by the markets. That also means that the banks are searching for new ways to monetize that. If they cannot charge directly for the infrastructure, especially when it comes to instant payments, they need to find ways how to charge indirectly for the infrastructure because somebody needs to pay the party here.
Right.
So this is where what people often forget about. If they said, hey, the regulator says instant payment must be for free, that does not mean that open banking is for free. That doesn't and
Right.
that is the link maybe also to the conference and also to your question up front. At the end, merchants need to pay. So it's maybe cheaper than other payments methods, maybe.
Yeah.
So, but at the end, if nobody pays for that, then there is no product, and I think merchants will play that role.
Yeah, and back to our thing, speaking of merchants, back to our question about open banking. What is the blocker, do you think, for merchants adopting open banking?
The user.
The user.
The user.
The user doesn't understand? Or?
No, the user has two aspects. And number one, the user experience is still not as advanced as with cards. So, and users are lazy. They want to. It should be as easy as possible. They don't want to do two factors and enter passwords or whatever it is. The user don't want that. And the card networks and card-based payments solve that in a better way than open banking. That will change over time. So, but at the moment, the user experience is not as good as it could be. There's also one of the reasons is also how to integrate that into the merchant flow and things like that. That's number one. Number two, it's also the pitch in the beginning was it is cheaper. And I personally don't believe in products which are just cheaper. So being cheaper is one aspect, but normally you don't bring a product into the market. I don't know if the end consumer is using the product. Maybe the end consumer is complaining because of the usability. And because it's cheaper, that is not the only driver. So I think the industry overestimated the role of the costs in that game. Because as long as you have 1% of the wallet, the cost effect is also minor. If you have 20% of the wallet, it's a different game. But going from 1% to 20 is a big journey.
Right. And what about chargebacks? What's the difference in terms of you can do chargebacks on the scheme rails or the network rails, but how does it work with the open banking?
That's an interesting thing, because these chargeback and the chargeback related processes are at the end invented by the card industry, let's call it industry.
Industry, right.
There's a process in place which is there over the last 20 years, which is now becoming better and better, more digital and things like that. When we set up, we as banks set up open banking based payments, nobody thought about chargebacks. They all thought about the payment itself and then it's done. Which is only one part of the story. That means also here, we now run into a situation that, hey, we need to think about chargebacks. Maybe we don't call it chargeback, maybe we don't call it because chargeback is a word which is linked to cards. But at the end, there will be processes where end consumers say, hey guys, I want to have my money back, there's fraud, there's whatever it is, and we need processes for that. And especially as on open banking, we have the situation that parts of the open banking transactions are instant, parts are not. So
Okay.
that also brings us different processes when it comes to chargeback or chargeback-like things onto the table. So there is complexity. There is complexity which also increases the costs for the overall payment method. Maybe not for the transaction, but overall. Also we as Deutsche Bank, we have an open banking payment method in the market since 3 years. And we learned together with our merchants, hey, there is fraud, there are chargeback-like cases, and somebody needs to deal with that. And this is partly the merchant and partly the bank, and both sides said, okay, we need to have processes, systems, and maybe also people to deal with that, and that's not for free.
Right.
So, and the industry needs to learn who's paying for that.
Yeah.
Is that a job of the bank? Okay. Is it a job of the merchant? Okay. But there's no common ground right there.
Yeah, so we're still work in progress.
That's still work in progress. That also shows that open banking based payment methods are in the beginning of the evolution and not at the end.
Yes, we're in our infancy. Excellent. And so what recommendation would you give to merchants right now?
Number one, educate themselves. Because to be honest, open banking is only a word. So people understand a lot of different things when they talk about open banking or open finance. Really get on a level deeper. So I said, okay, make themselves really a clear understanding of what is this, what is the added value, what are really the costs end to end, not only the transaction, really a lot of different things. Really ask themselves, what is really the use cases? Is there a need? And not only for the merchant, also for the consumers. And how to bring that to the market. Merchants need to educate the end consumer. We also must be realistic. The end consumer they don't wait it for such a payment method. They don't woke up in the morning and said, I want to pay with open banking. No,
I do. I wake up every morning.
I wake up in the morning.
Open banking?
Maybe the guys here are doing that, but the reality is that there's honestly they can pay. So it's not that there's no way to pay their bills on an online shop or whatever it is. So that means you need to convince the end consumer. Maybe with a better user experience, maybe with other added value, maybe with education and things like that. And convincing is nothing which is easy and nothing which is for free. And we should always not underestimate the other payment methods have a brand. So there is and brand means there is an organization who has the job to push the brand to the end consumer and to convince the end consumer. With open banking, there is no brand, because there are these banks, and there are these payments, so it's invisible, which has some advantages because nobody cares about brand perception and things like that. Makes some things easier, but for bringing things to the market, it's harder because stuff which is invisible. It's hard to convince somebody that, hey, here we have this invisible payment method, please use it.
It's like the electricity. Yeah.
It's like electricity.
Exactly.
Because also to understand that because banks came from the classical in Europe SEPA payments. SEPA payments also for the end consumer it's invisible. Nobody cares. It's existing rails, it's infrastructure they are working. And when you're coming out of that world and bringing in a payment method to the merchant and the end consumer, that we just bring our rails to the end consumer. That but your end consumer did not know about that there are rails. They even don't know the word rails. And that is, and they also don't care about the rails.
You mean train tracks? Or?
What are you talking about? We are using this rails or this rails. I just want to pay and get my stuff out of the internet and that's it. In the most convenient way.
Yeah, very good. Interesting. Wow, you're a plethora of knowledge. And so let's just end it on one thing. Predictions for 2025 for the next year. Do you have any? What's your number one prediction for the payments industry and so the next year?
Prediction number one, consolidation of the bank-driven initiatives, because we have API, we have the digital euro, we have open banking, PSD3 are coming, SPAA and things like that. That's too much. Because they're fighting for the same use cases, they're fighting for the same transaction. That's too much. I think that is number one of my prediction. 2 or 3 of them will merge or disappear. And we will realize, okay, maybe it's one way to go, not 10 ways to go. And number 2, I think the digital euro will also face the reality right now, because it's at the moment government driven, EZB driven, and things like that. It's too much ignored. Is the industry and the market and the ecosystem, what is their play into the game? Can you really force them? So I don't believe in forcing someone. So I
Yeah.
think you need to argue, even if there is a legal tender, so which is still the idea, but nobody knows what that means at the end. So you need to have a positive discussion, not a negative discussion. Because if you're forced to, you had to do that, and they said, yeah, maybe I had to, but I make it in a bad way because somebody's forcing me to do that. I don't want it. And I don't think that bringing a product into the market with forcing the market to use it is a long-term sustainable thing.
Yeah, got it. Very good. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Have a glass on me.
Let's cheers.
Great to see you. Cheers.
Thanks.